Here's an update, Brian, on something we've been talking about here lately, the early TV wrestling. We got earlier because what we talked about last week about the experimental broadcasts over here from our friend Adam's research over in, where's he from?
England.
In his various parts. Well, he's from the UK, somewhere there. I don't want to just, yes, but now Steve from New Zealand.
Yeah, this is Steve Ogilvy. This guy's a serious historian. I know Steve.
Well, you know Steve. And that's even better than knowing Bo. Except if Bo knows you know Steve, and then there's going to be trouble. So nevertheless, Steve Ogilvy from New Zealand. I didn't know if you wanted to just out him as being, one of us for fear that he might be run off from his home country. But, well, that's why he says he sent this directly because, or emailed this instead of sending it directly to you because he annoys you.
He doesn't
annoy you that much?
He does not annoy me in any way. He's a historian. That's when you say Steve from New Zealand, there's only one. It's Steve Ogilvy. And he says
he's emailing this instead of messaging you directly because he's annoyed you enough.
Well, whenever there's a guest to program, he, lends pictures. I don't know what he sends.
He lends an unwanted opinion or an unsolicited piece of advice.
He's never annoyed me. I don't know why are you believing this liar? He's never annoyed me. Believe me, he's never annoyed me.
He just chimes in whether his name is mentioned or not. Hey, Steve, let me tell you, you just go in the back, and when we need you, we will send for you.
Steve was very close with Dave Cameron, the wrestling historian.
Oh, so that's who he had Harley with. Okay, now I understand.
What?
It was
all right.
Steve.
You see, I regret saying anything.
Well, that's.
Thanks for writing in, Steve.
That's what the listeners say every week about you. They regret that you said anything, but nevertheless, Steve did have one piece of advice to give us before he never speaks to us again.
Get out of show business.
Apparently, there was earlier television wrestling than there was from, what did we say, 1942 over here. We had narrowed it down to those experimental broadcasts in Schenectady. But now he being Steve, he says the earliest known televised bout took place before the Second World War on the 12th of March, 1938 by the BBC in London. So that, those BBC, they're snooty son of a bitches. They always got to be first with everything. The bout was Earl McCready, who of course was a former amateur great and then was one of the top pros of that time period. Originally from Canada, against Percy Foster from South Africa. I don't know much about Percy, but it's amazing because Steve included a picture or screenshots, as they say, of the Radio Times magazine, the magazine that was the radio schedule in London, at least as of 1938, when this issue was printed, but it also had a television schedule of their early experimental television broadcasts. And there, I'll skip ahead for a second, go back to the match. He actually also sent advertising for the television sets that were available in London at the time. This was 1938. There were between 3,000 and 4,000 television sets in London, and they were owned by the very wealthy because there was a model with a 4-inch screen, like 4.5 by 4.5 inches.
Wow.
Brian, imagine that.
Wow.
That was available for the equivalent of like $8,000 or $9,000 today, and it also had a built-in radio. Or they had the top of the line model was a cabinet floor standing device that had a radio and a television screen that looked like, to be honest, it was probably about 12 or 13 inches like TV when I was a kid. And that was 20 grand in today's money. But anyway, the Radio Times had the television listings, and apparently about this match, there was commentary for the match, which may have been simulcast on radio, not sure, but there was no audience because Steve has seen a picture from one of these matches, and it's the two wrestlers in the ring, a referee, and a bare studio with the announcer at the desk. And so this was, in the experimental stages. And he said there were several other wrestling shows broadcast by the BBC before and after the war. And then obviously ITV, which is the World of Sport Wrestling that the modern fans may have heard of, started in the UK from 1955 onwards. But never again, and obviously these things don't exist because they weren't even recorded at the time. They were just broadcast live as they happened, and there was really no method at the time of recording it and broadcasting at the same time in the 30s, right? You had to do one or the other. Even with a kinescope, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah,
anyhow,
I'm looking here at the schedule that he sent. Like for Saturday, March 12th, which is the day at 9:40 p.m., you have Catch As Catch Can Wrestling, what you listed earlier. 2:30 and approximately 3:35, Inter-University Sports. Some of the events of the Oxford versus Cambridge sports will be televised, conditions permitting, directly from the White City. At 3:15, we have gardening, crafting fruit trees. At 3:25, news film. And then we have nothing until 9 o'clock. Cabaret cartoons. At 9, followed by 9:30, news film, followed by 9:40, Catch As Catch Can. That's what fascinates me, the entire, what was on a schedule, what constituted a schedule back then and for the next 10 years, 15 years, really. I mean, this is so early. This is what,
1938 is the first one.
Yeah, so really for the next 15 years, everything was just getting established and the war delayed everything.
Well, and especially in England, the war caused major delays because they sound like they were ahead of the United States before the war.
News film, though. Not news film. British movie tone.
Yes. Well, it's like the Edward R. Murrow would have just been getting started, but whoever the voice was, that would say, and now the news, and they'd have the movie tone news. Those were the newsreels that would be played in the theaters along with the cartoons and the coming attractions before you got to see the movie. This is London.
It's amazing. We have people from New Zealand telling us about what's happening in England in 1938, and then we have people from England telling us what was happening in the States in the 50s and the 40s.
I have people hopefully telling me what's going on in the world today, so I don't have to fucking actually participate.